The ANC has expelled its former president, Jacob Zuma, and is pursuing an appeal for the trademark case in which it alleges MK has infringed its trademark. Let's get into this and more in this episode of SMWX. Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. If you're new around here, on this channel we explore South African politics through interviews and analysis, and I'm your host, Mpofu-Walsh. Well, let's start with this decision of the ANC to expel its former president, Jacob Zuma. So the National Disciplinary Committee met amidst protest from Zuma about this not being in person, but forged ahead and has ultimately expelled Mr. Zuma from the ANC. Now, this comes after a long history of battles between MK Party and the ANC, but I think this also needs to be placed in a deeper history of South Africa and ANC politics, because this is unprecedented. We've seen so many unprecedented things in the last few months in South African politics that unprecedented is starting to feel normal. But we need to pause and reflect and analyze. So former President Zuma has, of course, initiated a strategy to try to confound the ANC. The strategy was remain a member but create a new party called Umkhonto weSizwe, which obviously traces its history in part from the ANC. Now, of course, former President Zuma did this for an interesting reason. If the ANC attacked him, in his view, he would then become a martyr. By expelling him, he becomes a sacrificial figure. On the other hand, if they did nothing, which is what the ANC did for a very long time, then the party looked weak and like they didn't know what to do about this Zuma-MK problem. And all the way through the election, Zuma was able to play this game of creating tension within the ANC and creating, in chess, it's called a fork. If you do this, there's a problem, but if you do the opposite, the only other thing you can do, there's also a problem. So he put the ANC in a fork, as it were, and the ANC had to choose which was the less worse option: doing nothing and looking weak for a long time, or expelling him and creating a martyr out of him. They delayed on the decision. There were questions about when the disciplinary would be held. Eventually it was held, and Zuma didn't attend, but his representative, Tony Yangeni, I believe, in the ANC constitution, you have to be represented by an ANC member, and that's why Mr. Yangeni represented Zuma. So this brings to an end that quite long sub-story of the broader story of MK versus ANC, but also maybe a deeper story about multiple different splits away from the ANC over time. And it tells us a number of interesting things about the ANC and MK Party and where they are right now. Clearly, the ANC saw the political moment as ripe once it had finished its government negotiations to then strike. And maybe when the MK is in a relatively weak position, given that it's nowhere in government now, and the ANC wouldn't have to deal with the complexities of trying to fire Zuma while it was in partnership with MK, they saw this as the right moment to strike. But, of course, Zuma still has various options. He can appeal directly within the ANC, and of course there's always the option, if he thinks that there are procedural or substantive irregularities, to go to court as well. And that again may, from a political perspective, kind of continue to mire the ANC in this problem. What I find interesting, and those of you who are younger may not remember this, but the way the ANC defended Zuma during the what has now been called state capture era was incredible. It seemed like no matter what former President Zuma did, the ANC, through its then Secretary General and spokesperson Gwede Mantashe, would defend him no matter what. And one can quite understand why former President Zuma began to think that the ANC would defend him through anything during that presidency, because we had the Waterkloof landing, the Nkandla situation, various other state capture allegations, and the ANC stood by Zuma. So for them to belatedly pretend as if his actions now are terrible papers over the way in which the ANC itself, if anyone, was the key vehicle behind the Zuma presidency and the Zuma moment in South African politics. In some ways, the MK party has allowed the ANC to pretend to be against Zuma, when in actual fact, if you go back deeper into the history of South African politics, Zuma and the ANC are inextricably linked. Fam, I just wanted to interrupt this episode to let you know the 4 ways you can help SMWX. Way number 1, you can invite me to speak at your institution or company. Way number 2, you can advertise on this channel. Way number 3, you can become a member of this channel. The link to the membership is down below. And number 4, you can buy merch, that's books or hoodies. Now let's get back to the episode. All our contact details are in the description box below. Now, former President Zuma is, as far as I'm aware, and comment down below, the first ever ANC president to be expelled from the party. So in terms of the over 100-year history of the ANC, this is a first. And I think it shows in some ways the increasing incoherence within ANC leadership. The party's gone from 57 to 39 now. Former leaders are breaking ranks, taking huge chunks of the party with them. And with this GNU moment, although all seems rosy in the garden right now, it's clear that there are elements of the ANC alliance, at least, which are particularly dissatisfied by this GNU arrangement. And so what we've seen with MK, we have also seen previously with the EFF, but the question now, I think, is what happens if there's another split in the ANC? What happens if another leader or another alliance partner moves against the ANC? Will they draw lessons from the way that the MK has done it? Because it seems that each time it happens with more force and with more power. The EFF was bigger than COPE. MK was bigger even than the EFF, at least in the first election. So it's an interesting moment in our politics. Of course, the ANC has probably looked at this and said, look, our constituency is already outside of the ANC. It's not with MK. We need to firm up our base within the chattering classes. We need to make sure that we present an image that we are taking corruption and state capture seriously. And even though the Zuma thing isn't directly related to that, we have seen ANC leaders come out and saying the ANC is better without someone like former President Zuma inside. So there will be a section of the ANC's electorate that with which this will resonate, but I'm not sure how big that section and that segment is. On the other hand, for MK, I think it's pretty clear that they will again benefit from this, playing the martyr card, playing the card of Zuma being persecuted by the ANC, and they'll simply turn around and say, look, we told you so. The ANC has always been intent on removing Zuma. It's happened, and this is all a big plot to oust Zuma. So I think both parties might draw positives from this, which is typical in these kind of political arrangements. Now, in tandem and along with this, we've got a more historical story, because former President Zuma is in fact a president of the ANC, but also South Africa. And this is the first time when we have really seen a former president break from the status quo, be expelled from the ANC as a party, but also kind of shun former presidential roles. You know, often former presidents will come to the State of the Nation address to legitimize the address, or they'll go to the inauguration of the president to legitimize that. And now we have a president who's basically said, I'm not here to legitimize any of this. Count me out. And in South African history, I think this moment will be remembered for its unprecedented nature. So we have that. Alongside that, just a brief reflection on the long-running series of court battles, because remember, the MK has fought a number of court battles. They won the battle against being deregistered. So they were appropriately registered as a party. They contested the election. Then the ANC brought the trademark dispute battle to say that the name Mkhonto weSizwe as well as the logo were effectively owned by the ANC, and the MK was infringing on the ANC's ownership rights and its trademark rights. The ANC lost that as well. Then there was the electoral case where could Zuma stand as a candidate? Remember, we've been through a lot as a country. Could Zuma be a candidate for parliament? Electoral court said he could. Constitutional court struck that down and said he couldn't. Now, the trademark case is being appealed. So a case that was lost by the ANC is being appealed. Well, technically not even appealed. In terms of procedural law, there's what's called an application for leave to appeal. So this is when you go to a court and you say, we think that your decision was wrong. We want to be able to appeal this to another court. And that court then decides, yes, I'll give you permission to appeal it to another court or not. And in this case, we're still at that stage. So it's not an appeal, as I've seen it being reported somewhere. It's an application for leave to appeal. So the judge who gave this judgment, or the bench which gave this judgment, will look at the arguments and say, okay, maybe another court will come to a different decision. You can go ahead and appeal, and then the appeal will happen. But they may also say, we don't even think there's a prospect of another court finding against us, so they'll put the case to bed completely. Again, the MK is in an interesting position because, once again, they can continue this legal and political strategy of saying, look, the ANC is trying to undermine us instead of trying to defeat us fair and square in the political battleground. They want to do so by taking away our name, taking away our logo. The ANC can, to its base, say we're doing everything in our power to try and make sure that MK doesn't ride on our history. The fact of the matter is this is still, if the leave to appeal is dismissed, that's it, that's the end. Even if there's an appeal, could well go to the SCA. Who knows when that would be heard, and then it could even go to the Constitutional Court. So it's still a long way away from finality. But just to give you a sense of where that case fits and what it's about the trademark case and whether Mkhonto weSizwe can use the logo and use the name. Fam, you asked for some SMWX merch and we have delivered. I know you're always looking for ways to help support and grow this channel. So why don't you buy yourself an SMWX hoodie? Super comfy, super warm, and you can represent SMWX. You can check the link down below for how to buy your SMWX hoodie and help build and grow this channel so we can bring you more interviews, more analysis, and more educational insights. Now let's get back to it. So where we stand now, to close off in South African politics, is at an interesting place. I feel like there's a kind of quiet after the storm of the election. And everyone is strategizing and trying to figure out who they are, where they fit, and where they stand. Opposition politics has a huge opportunity and a huge threat. The opportunity is to present itself as the contrast to the GNU and the status quo, and to present a credible plan of how South Africa can move away from the GNU, particularly in the way that the GNU has irritated some people, bringing the DA back into power, bringing parties like the Freedom Front into power, bringing parties like the Patriotic Alliance into the mix, and going against a very long history of settled ANC policy. Of course, there are those who feel that that has actually rescued and rebirthed the ANC. The GNU itself, though, is also it's kind of in an interregnum, like nothing is happening. We don't have a plan. We don't know how it's going to make decisions. I see Fikile Mbalula did a press conference, but he's not government. He's the ANC spokesperson. So he can tell us what the ANC is thinking, but the GNU apparently is not the ANC. So when are we going to figure out how this GNU actually works, let alone what they're actually going to do? Like, what is the GNU plan? Apart from, obviously, the State of the Nation speech, which is very vague. We're a month in now, and we don't know where exactly we're heading. There are a lot of voices, and it's very incoherent at the moment. So I feel like there's a kind of quiet, probably before a new political storm. And of course, the expulsion of Jacob Zuma will probably be part of that next chapter. What does MK choose to do? How do they choose to be in opposition? And exactly how coherent can the GNU remain? And how coherent can opposition politics remain? And I think the force that remains more coherent will probably win this generation of political battles. But it's only just beginning, and we'll see where things go. Comment down below, help us get to 200,000 subscribers, and let me know what you think about the expulsion of former President Jacob Zuma, as well as the trademark case, but also where we are right now in South African politics with the GNU, opposition parties like the MK, and what they mean for the future. Thanks for another installment of SMWX and joining us on this installment, and look forward to seeing you on the next ones. Aye.